Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Okay, I'll jump right into it. So the first thing I suppose that I would also want to talk about is what SIEM is. Most people would have heard of it. So it essentially stands for Security Incident and Event Management. So it's an analytics platform which is going to take all of the data that's coming out, that's being pumped out by all your security sensors, by all your devices, and is going to apply some level of insight to find out what are the actions you need to take possibly to secure yourself. Now, if you look at cybersecurity as a whole, it's actually got these three legs typically that you talk about. So one leg is prevention. So the best thing is, of course, that you deter threats. You don't let threats enter the environment. You stop them from happening. You stop any incident from happening. The second part, of course, is that we know that prevention is not 100%. It can never be 100%, which is why you have to fall back to some extent on detection. So detection is where it's more of a detective control, as you call it. So it's going to take care of the things that your active defenses are not able to prevent from getting into your environment. And worst case, of course, is the resilience part of it. So even if your preventive controls didn't work, if your detective controls didn't work, then at some point, if you get a ransomware attack, then you are in deep trouble. So your entire planning, your entire environment, your system should be robust enough, or you should have planned for a backup scenario, a contingency scenario, where you can recover and get back on your feet quickly. So that's the resilience part of it. Now, today's discussion is going to be more focused on the detection side of things. And that is not to say that prevention and resilience are not important. All three are equally important. But I think without having all these three dimensions covered, it becomes a very risky proposition for any organization. Now, one of the questions that we typically get asked is, hey, why are you talking to me about an SIEM? I have a next generation firewall. I have the latest and the greatest endpoint detection and response system. I've got an antivirus system. I've got IPS IDS sensors. I've got a secure web gateway. So I'm protected. Why do I need a SIEM? So I think the answer to that again goes back to a multi-layered approach in threat prevention. One part of it is, of course, that you want to do proactive risk management. You're going to make sure that you're going to secure all of the interfaces, all of the threat surfaces you have. If you have got, for example, servers or assets that are exposed to the internet, what you want to do is you want to have a firewall in between so that you're controlling access to it. If you have again a lot of IT assets, be it on the cloud, be it on premise, you want to keep scanning them for vulnerabilities. You want to make sure that they are very hardened. Unwanted ports are closed out. You have necessary controls to give access. So all those sort of get into the preventive control side of thing. So you are assuming that people are trying to attack your channel. They are trying to make use of the vulnerabilities, exploit the vulnerabilities in your systems. So you are going to do a lot of things to prevent that from happening. You're going to try and make sure that no one gets in. But despite that, like I said, of course, there are always going to be cases where people are able to bypass your preventive controls and they get into the system. So at that time, what you want to do is you want to have some detective controls in place. So this assumes that you will get breached at some point in time. And what you want to do here is you want to have a framework that is looking to see if you have been breached. Is there a bad actor in your environment? And to deal with all of this residual risk associated with someone getting in, we use the whole security analytics function, and this is the place where an SIEM really comes in. So this is more or less your last line of defense. So you have your preventive controls, you have so much of monitoring going on, but the SIEM is your final line of defense to make sure that in case someone gets to, at least you are aware that someone's gotten through. Again, talking a little bit more about how an SIEM operates. Now, if you look at the screen here, this shows a typical IT environment. So you normally have a full stack starting with your external perimeter devices. You'll have routers and switches, you'll have load balancers, then you'll have your application stack. So you'll have web servers which are picking up your web traffic, routing it internally. You'll have the app servers which is actually the bulk of your business logic. You'll have messaging systems, you'll have databases, MySQL, Oracle, whatnot. You might have security sensors, antivirus, IDS, IPS. You'll have hypervisors and virtualization going on. You'll have Citrix, you'll have VMware that's running in your environments. Now, of course, you also have public cloud coming into the picture. So you'll have either applications hosted or developed there, or assets that are hosted on public cloud. You might have things like, say, Salesforce, or you might have O365, which are more of SaaS services that are being consumed. And then, of course, you'll have end users themselves. They can connect from a laptop. Nowadays, there's a lot of mobile devices. So all of these are generating a lot of data. And the reason you have the SIM is that it's collecting all of the logs, all of the information that's being churned from all of these different sources, and is being put into a centralized repository. So what that means is that you get total visibility around what's happening in your environment. That's one of the key use cases. You get the ability to correlate between different data sources. So if you are monitoring, for example, your let's say your SaaS applications, you'll have visibility about, okay, who's logging in from where. And again, you have many different tools that will do similar things, but the SIEM is the one place where you get that consolidated point of view. You get the ability to do context and enrichment. So if you want to add in HR data, you want to say that, hey, these set of users are more important because they are executive, because they are management. This set of users have access to my dev environment because they're developers. You can add all that context. And of course, you're talking about a massive amount of data. The system should be able to handle that, and you should be able to finally, end of the day, detect what's happening in your environment. So this is the reason you need a SIM. And then I'll move on to seeing how an actual threat would function in a real environment. And once I get through the case study, my colleague Murugan will go through the same thing with a live demo to see how that would actually get picked up by an SIM solution. So some of the framework that you would utilize as part of detection, typically on the SIEM side, is the MITRE ATT&CK framework, the threat intelligence framework, and the risk aggregation or the risk consolidation framework. So MITRE ATT&CK, I'm not sure how many on the call would have heard of it. It actually stands for adversarial, excuse my handwriting, adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. So what this is essentially at the heart of it is, it's a set of uh, uh, how should I say? It's a set of procedures, it's a set of practices that have been consolidated from the point of view of the adversary. If you have an attacker, if you have a hacker, then if he wants to attack your environment, how would he think about making his way into your environment, and then successfully weaponizing some kind of a payload, delivering it, and then taking over your resources or doing some damage. So there's a whole chain. You can almost call it a kill chain. So there's a kill chain involved. So the attack framework looks at all the tools and techniques that would be leveraged by an attacker to move through your environment ultimately and do damage to you. So if you look at it from left to right, for example, they'll want to get initial access. That is the first thing that they'll want to do. Then they'll want to escalate their privilege. Then they'll want to do a discovery of what services are there. Then they'll want to move and expand to as many assets as possible. And then finally, they want to ultimately exfiltrate data, or take over control of your assets, and then maybe deploy ransomware, or take out data, or whatever it is. So that attack is becoming more and more common now in today's parlance. If you look at any device, if not just the SIEM part of it, if you look at endpoint detection systems, if you look at firewalls, everyone is scrambling to call themselves MITRE ATT&CK compliant, with the reason being that from a end organization view, you get a fair view of if any alerts are being triggered, which part of the attack landscape do they map to, and how much at risk are you at. So if it's, for example, somewhere more on the left side, that means someone's trying to get in, but it's still early stages. So you need to be careful, but not too worried. If you're actually finding use cases or alerts triggering on the right side of it, that is something to be very worried about, because that means that most likely you have already been attacked, you have been breached. So you need to start taking remedial measures. Then there's a part around threat intel. So threat intel is of course equally important. And to be honest, in today's day and age, adversaries are also becoming more and more sophisticated. So they're finding ways around this. If it's a zero-day attack, for example, you won't have any matching intelligence. You won't know which servers are being used, which domains are being used. So for 0 days, it's actually a little outdated, to be honest. But for known actors, known ransomware, known malware, typically there's a certain pattern that emerges. Which URLs are they using? Which file names are they using? What kind of file properties are typically involved? So all those are collected as part of threat intel. And what you want is you want to be able to match the data that is coming through your systems and see if there's a hit for any known bad actor in the intelligence out there. One of the most important things is also going to be the risk-based alerting, or rather the risk consolidation. So if you have a particular asset, a web server, a app server, whatever, now today's day and age, if you look at something called APTs, APT stands for advanced persistent threats. So these are not like the original, I guess, bad actors where something comes in and you detect it and you sort of take action. Here, there are cases where you'll have malware delivered and then lying in your systems for weeks, months, sometimes even a year before you get to a point where any alert before a point where they take action. So to look at things like that, you want to make sure that you are looking at this low volume and possibly lower risk activity by itself. But when you sum it all up over a period of time, for example, it becomes risky. So you want to take a asset and user based view, see what are all the risky things happening over a period of time. It could be weeks, months, quarters, years. And then based on that, you want to see a risk score. And if a risk score is breached, then you want to take action. So it's not the alert itself. You might get 10, 20, 30 alerts per day, but what is the kind of alert you're seeing over a period of time, and that's where the risk aggregation comes into play. If I look at a simple example of a malware, for example, the simplest way it happens. So first step that will happen is that again a bad actor from outside is going to try and connect to all the assets inside your network. So they'll scan your firewall looking for open port, looking for vulnerability, so that they can access your internal environment. So there's a network scan essentially that they'll start off with. If they're able to find a connection to any server or servers inside your environment, the next thing they'll do is they'll try to attempt a brute force attack. Finally, if they're able to crack it, someone's use a default password and easily guess password, and because of that, if they get access to the asset, at that point, what they are going to do is they're going to deliver that payload into your system. And at that point, essentially, your system is infected, be it a PC, be it a server, whatever it is, it's infected. So this is where what we call command and control. So command and control traffic will start emanating from your internal network to the bad actor, and then he'll start uh, figuring out what actions, what damage he can do from that point. So if you look at a scenario like this, how will you hunt for the threats with something like Splunk, which is a SIEM tool? So first thing that I spoke about, of course, was the network scan. So you're doing the network scan. How can we detect that? So in that case, if you look at the firewall itself, the firewall is going to have its own logs that are being generated, the traffic logs, then the syslog as they call it. So from the firewall logs, one of the rules that you can set up, for example, to look out for is you look for network scanning detection. So there will be quite a lot of this going on. So it will be a high volume alert, but at least it's going to tell you that, hey, someone's trying to do some kind of a network scanning. And then also what you can do is you can do threat intelligence, and then you can see which of these scanning activities. In some cases, it's actually okay to do the scanning, because if you are doing a vulnerability testing, then that is also something that will trigger it. So what you want to do is you want to find the malicious users, or the malicious hackers or malicious actors who are trying to do this particular act from outside. So the SIM is going to pick these two up ideally. Next, when it comes to brute force attack, at that point, what you can do is you can pick up the endpoint logs. So here again, you have a bunch of options. One is you might have an antivirus or endpoint detection solution installed, so that's going to pick it up. Or else, if you want to pick up the operating system logs itself, it could be Windows logs, it could be Unix logs. That's going to keep track of who's logging onto the system. So you can have a rule on the SIM configure that talks about brute force attack, for example, that's been detected. And the interesting thing here becomes, again, at this point, of course, you are also in the previous step, you had looked for what was happening on the firewall. And here you're looking at what's happening on the endpoint. If it's the same actor, there's an element of correlation also that's going to happen in the backend. So you're looking at anomalous login, you're looking at brute force attack detected. You can also look at again the threat intel part of it. Yeah. Finally, when it comes to payload delivered, so at this point, typically what you would do here is this is more dependent on the EDR or the antivirus solutions. So they are very, very tuned to finding files that have been delivered on your endpoint. So malicious file detected, to be honest, is something that is fairly common, even though you wouldn't think it. But what is actually more interesting is, so if your antivirus, if it's McAfee, if it's Symantec, whatever it is, if it is saying that this host is getting repeated infections and the same infection, then what that would tell you is that, hey, looks like something's gotten in, even though I'm cleaning it every time it's reinstalling itself. So I am actually pretty badly infected, right? And then the other thing you can also do is you can actually look for outbreak also. So outbreak of malware. So that's one more rule that the SIEM can look at, where it says that, hey, that infection is spreading to other endpoints inside your network. And finally, when it comes to outbound traffic, for example, that is where you can see that, hey, there's a traffic spike. Typically, I don't have so much traffic coming from your from my from this particular server. I also see that they are using a different. So what attackers will typically do is that they will not use common ports, or else they'll try to disguise the traffic that's going out, so that it is not easy for someone to find out that there is some malicious traffic that's happening in the system. So they'll use some different ports or protocols. So they might use SMB protocol. They might try to piggyback off HTTP when it's not expected, or all of those things. So you can have very specific rules around that. And then of course you have again the threat intel part of it. So if you look at all of this together now, if you put that together, if you recollect what I had said earlier about risk-based alerting, for this one particular asset that we were talking about, you will see that a number of things have happened. So from the firewall, you are seeing that there was a network scanning detection rule that was triggered. And it was also a source matched as coming from a malicious source IP. From the endpoint logs, from the OS logs, you said that, okay, I detected brute force activity. From the antivirus, you have said, hey, malicious file has been detected. And then again, from the firewall, you are saying that, look, I'm seeing some weird traffic go out, right? So this is the correlation part of it, that, like I was saying, all of this comes together into the SIEM, and then you get a view that, hey, all of these activities are happening on the same asset. And if I map it to MITRE, I am seeing that there is a certain passage of events across the cyber kill chain. So I have to be worried, because now I'm at malicious, now I'm at anomalous traffic detected, which is more on the exfiltration and impact side of things. So this is how typically the SIEM would add value when you're hunting for threats, when you're looking for bad activity. And at this point, I'll also hand it over to Murugan before so that he can demonstrate this in action. Before I do that, any questions from anyone? If there are any questions, you can put it on the chat box also. If not, then we can move on to the demo part of it. Okay, looks like there are no questions. So Murugan, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Let me share. Okay. Are you able to see my screen, sir?
Yes, Murugan.
Thank you. So before I begin, let me introduce myself. So I'm a Splunk consultant architect for Cyxtera, and I lead the technical delivery for Cyxtera. So the solution that we will use for today's demo is called Smart Security Monitoring. So it's an application that sits on top of Splunk as just like any other app in Splunk. So how this application basically works is data is traditionally collected. I mean, data is collected in Splunk in the traditional way using the universal forwarders, the add-ons, things like that. And the data that is ingested into Splunk is normalized with the common information model. So its rules engine then runs on top of this normalized data, and any detection made by this rules engine is sent to the incident management framework as incidents, from where the SOC analyst can start his investigation. So on the capability side of the solution, so it can do real-time monitoring, and it has 250 plus use cases in its library. It can do incident management. It has investigation dashboards that can help investigate the detections. It can do risk-based analytics, and the solution is also tightly integrated with threat intelligence and the MITRE framework. So the first dashboard that I would like to direct your attention to is the MITRE compliance dashboard. So the top row here, this row it represents all the different tactics that are used by the attackers, and the columns for each row represent all the different tactics under each tactic. So the blue boxes that you see here signify that there are rules to detect these techniques, and the light blue boxes signify that there are rules, but those rules are not enabled. So bright blue boxes mean that they are enabled. The light blue ones mean that they are not enabled. The gray ones mean that there are no rules to detect those techniques. So this kind of view is very helpful to see, to understand, and to get a perspective of all the different techniques covered by the rules in the system. So the second dashboard that I want to show you is the MITRE ATT&CK metrics dashboard. So this is also a similar dashboard, but from a different point of view. So this dashboard highlights all the different detections for techniques. So the orange blue boxes, all the highlights that you see here mean that there is detection for those techniques, and the number of detections are highlighted here at the top. So as Sam mentioned, if you are seeing a lot of activity under initial access, that would mean that an attacker is trying to get into the system. If you're seeing a lot of detections under privilege escalation, that would mean that the attacker is already in your environment and he's trying to gain root user privilege or super user privilege. And if you're seeing detections under, on the right side under command and control or exfiltration, that would mean that the attacker has successfully gained access to one of your systems and is taking out data. So as Sam mentioned, right, MITRE ATT&CK is this kind. With this kind of MITRE ATT&CK view, you'll be able to get a kill chain view of what is happening in your environment, where the attacker is at the moment, and what is he doing in your environment. So I can click on one of these boxes and it will take me to the detections. So let me just reload this page. So this is the incident management framework of the solution. So as you can see here, there are a couple of detections for brute force. Well, here I can drill down into the incident details, and I can see information like the source IP address, the destination IP address. The source IP address is where the attack is originated from. The destination IP address is the asset that is experiencing the attack. You can see details about the number of success, the number of failures, and then details about the rules itself. And then the interesting piece of information here is about the threat. So the solution is designed in such a way that for every detection, it checks the IP address. So in this case, it's the IP address. So it checks the IP address against the threat intel database and identifies if it's a match or not. So in this case, it is a match against the SolarWinds threat feed. So it has highlighted that. So from here, the SOC analyst, so the immediate action for the SOC analyst would be to make sure that there is no activity from this address reaching the environment. So he has to quickly block this IP address because there is already a threat into it. So if we scroll further down, we can see some drill downs here. I'll open one of the drill downs. So this is called the external host investigation drill down. So basically it is taking that external IP in the incident. It's populating it in this dashboard. So the first panel talks about the location of the IP address. So it looks like the location is somewhere from Hong Kong. If we scroll further down, we see the threat intel information. So again, the indicator or the IOC here is the IP address, and the threat collection is from SolarWinds. So if we scroll further down, we see a timeline view. So this timeline view basically is plotting all the detections for that particular IP address on a timeline. So whatever activity the IP address has performed, whatever has been detected for that IP address is plotted in this timeline view. So a SOC analyst, once he takes a look at it, will be able to understand the kind of activity that the IP address is performing. So if you can see here, around 11:16, he has made some network rule change. And then after that, there are a lot of failed authentications from that IP address. And then there is a brute force attack detection, meaning that he has successfully compromised the system. And then we also see a new SSH connection from a new source on that particular asset. And then later on, we see some suspicious outgoing traffic. So it kind of gives a chain view of what the attacker has, is trying or has accomplished in the environment. So further down, we see activities, network communication activity for the particular IP address. So we can see here, he is communicating with this particular asset on port 337 and port 22. And on the right side, we can see the change activities. You can see that he's, the activity for the IP address on all the log sources. So that dashboard is still loading. I mean, the panel is still loading. We'll come back to that. Further down, we see change activity. So in the change activity, we can see that the attacker has done something to the firewall. So he has edited some of the policies, so particularly the port filtering policy, and then he has committed the change. So he has successfully breached the firewall itself and made a change to allow himself inside the network. We can also see authentication related information in this panel. So here we can see there are a lot of failures. So there are different users, so admin, administrator, Alex, guest, info, and there are many users. For all of them, it is failure, and only for one user that is a success attempt. So that would mean that this is the user that has been compromised. So this panel has loaded now. So basically, this panel is talking about the presence of that IP address in all the different data sources. So we can see that he's in the flow logs, he's in the Linux secure authentication logs, he's in the firewall logs, he's in the firewall config logs, and so on. So this investigation dashboard is a very good place for a SOC analyst to start to do his initial investigation and understand the potential impact of the attacker's activity in the environment. I'll go back to the incident posture, and I'll remove these filters, and I filter down to a specific set of incidents. So I'm filtering down to the threat intel related incident. So the threat intel engine on this solution basically keeps checking the normalized data for any matches against its database. So it downloads the threat feeds, so and stores them as a database and keeps checking the normalized data for matches. So whatever matches it identifies, it creates them as incidents. So I'll just drill down on one of them to see the details. So this is an incident for an email match. So it's looking into the postfixes log. The postfix is the email server here, and it is looking at the email address, and it has identified that there is a match. So from here, the immediate action for the analyst is to block that block that email address from sending any emails to the system. Another incident, another incident is for the file name. So here it is looking at the PAN endpoint log. So the endpoint is, the agent is running the endpoints and it's collecting this information. So it is identified that there is a malicious file on the system, and it is highlighting that. So similarly for IP, so it will look into all the activity in the environment, and it is finding a match. So here again, there is a match for IP address, and this IP address activity is found in the PAN thread logs. Now I will remove this filter and show you all the other incidents that are available in the system. So if you can see here, there are different alerts, and there are a number of pages of these alerts. So this is a demo system. So the number of alerts here in the system are limited. So in a real production environment, the number of alerts can be 10 times or even 1,000 times more, depending upon the size of the environment. So if you can see here, all the different incidents have different priorities. So some are critical, some are high, some are medium, some are low. So when the number of incidents are high, so it's very logical for SOC analysts to concentrate only on the high and the critical priority ones, and miss the low priority ones like the port scan ones. So this is where risk-based analytics plays a major role. This is where risk-based analytics that Sam talks about comes into picture. So I will filter to one of its incidents. I'll show you the details of the incident. So we are looking at an incident where the attack tactic threshold, the threshold of 3 is what is mentioned here. So an attack tactic threshold of 3 has been exceeded for this particular asset. So basically what this incident, what the rule in the system is doing, that it is looking at all the different detections for a particular asset, and it is checking if the MITRE attack tactics experienced by the asset is more than 3, and if it is more than 3, it is capturing all the details, grouping all the details as a single incident, and it is creating it in the incident management framework. So in the details of the incident, we can see the risk object, which is nothing but the asset itself. So we have the object type also as a system, and we see risk score. So this is the aggregate risk score for all the detections that that it has managed to prove. So in the risk message, we can see all the different detections being grouped together. So without this risk-based analytics framework, all these messages that you see here will be as individual incidents with varying priorities. So it's very easy for a SOC analyst to miss some of the low priority ones, and many a times it's the low priority ones that have a major impact in the environment. So with risk-based analytics, there are two things. It groups all of these alerts together, and by doing that, it reduces the alert volume, and it also improves the true positiveness of the alert. So in the risk message, you can see that initially there is a brute force attempt, there is a lot of failed authentication, and then there is a new successful SSH connection, and then we see a ransomware node file placed, and then there is suspicious outgoing traffic. So basically, he has he has got into the system, he has compromised the system, and then he has started taking out the data from the system. So we get a kill chain view here of what the attacker has done to the system. So further down in the details of the incident, we can see details with regards to the attack tactics and techniques, and different tactics and techniques. And if we come further down, we have a drill down, which I want to show you. So this is called the risk analysis drill down for the asset. So if you see here, the asset is already pre-populated. So let me filter it down to the hour. So you can see it's running for the last 24 hours, and in the last 24 hours, there is an aggregate risk score of 5,000, 5,000, approximately 5,500. It also highlights all the different attack tactics and the MITRE attack tactics and techniques experienced by the system. And here it is plotting all the detections in a timeline view, similar to what we saw in the investigation till now. So this is in terms of the asset. So whatever detections has been identified on the asset, it is placed here. So we can see that there is a increase in the network activity. There is a failed authentication. There is brute force attack detection. There is new SSH connection, and then there is outgoing traffic. So all the detections are placed here in a timeline. So this view will help a SOC analyst immediately understand the state of the asset, whether the asset has been compromised or whether the asset is still salvageable. So in this case, the asset has been compromised. So the action for the analyst is to remove the system from the network and then start his investigation on that particular asset. Further down, we see the threat-related information here. So here we see the threat object, which is the external IP address. So in a production environment, you would see more of these in this panel, depending upon the number of detections for the asset. The risk object is the asset itself, and the count is the number of detections. So on the right, you see the risk messages. The risk messages is basically what we saw, all the different detections that we saw in the incident itself. So this kind of an analysis view is very helpful for the analyst to understand the potential risk for the asset. And when this risk score is plotted in a table, when we have all the assets and the risk score for each assets plotted in the table, the asset with the highest risk score will automatically float to the top of the table, and from there it is very easy for the organization or the SOC team to take action. So they can identify the risk objects there with the highest risk and start their patching activity. So apart from these dashboards, there we also have some other investigation dashboards, which I want to quickly show you. So this is a Windows access and change dashboard specific to Windows events. So this will look into the normalized Windows events and highlight the activity. So we can see information related to privilege escalation, locked accounts, failed logons, successful logons, things like that. And additionally, we also have one for IPS IDS. So it talks about the intrusion attempts, the block intrusions, the signatures, the location from where the attacks are originating from, things like that. We also have additional dashboards for specific to malware, firewall, network activity, and so on. So any questions so far? Okay, the last dashboard that I want to show you before I close the demo is the security posture dashboard. So this is a dashboard that an executive or the SOC team can display on a screen and understand what is happening in their environment. So at a high level, it talks about the threat activity, authentication users, total infections, malware, and the IDS attacks, block. It gives a summary of all that information. It also talks about risk-based information. It also talks about the different alerts in your environment. So we have 3 different types of alerts created in the system. So one is for the risk-based aggregation framework, and the other is the traditional detection rules, and the third one is for the threat intel rules. So there are 3 different types of alerts that the solution will generate. So this is like a single pane of glass view for an executive or for the SOC team to understand what's happening in the environment. So with that, I'll conclude this demo and hand it back to Sam if there are no questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Morgan. Any questions from anyone that we can answer? Okay, doesn't seem to be anything in the chat box. In that case, I think we can move on. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, I think just to conclude the discussion, I think what we spoke about today was more about the what is called the on-premise part of it, the on-prem monitoring as they call it. So there's also a part that's becoming more prevalent about cloud security and how will the SIM fit in that context. So again, I think the SIEM is equally important in the cloud context as well. If you look at the kind of solutions that you have for cloud security monitoring, typically you have platform native solutions like AWS Guard Duty, Azure Security Center. You'll have something called GCP Command Center. You'll also have something called a Cloud Access Security Broker, which is controlling how you access some of the SaaS applications, primarily on the SaaS side. And you'll also have something called the CSPM, which is more on the infrastructure as a service, where it's looking for your configuration management part of it. So one question that comes in again is in this emerging scenario where you have so many cloud services, SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, you have so many competing solutions. Why is the SIEM relevant in that context? So even in that context, for threat hunting, something like an SIM is still relevant because you have a lot of, again, data logs even that are being generated. If you look at something like Azure, for example, you have got your network flow logs called the NSG flow logs. You'll have your activity logs, which is almost like your audit trail. You'll have a lot of diagnostic logs, OS logs again. All of these again are a rich source of information, and typically most of the other items we spoke about, they won't give you comprehensive or complete analytics into what's going on from a security perspective in your environment. If you look at, for example, the kind of data sources you can tap into with the SIEM side of things in the cloud context, you'll have things like the audit logs, which are different for each environment. You'll have something like the security logs, which are again different for different providers. You'll have network traffic logs, and of course, you have your own storage coming out. That's very important. So that is also there. So all of these are rich sources of information for monitoring for threats. And once you deploy it, or once you integrate that with your SIM solution, you can do quite a few rules. So you can do things like, for example, you can monitor the storage. You can see if, for example, have you left any critical storage resources open to the public so that someone can just log on, take data away, or deliver a malware through the cloud. Are you seeing that you have a lot of VMs that are running? Are you seeing that? So here, for example, cryptojacking is a very interesting use case here. So you can catch instances of cryptojacking if your SIM has access to the audit logs. You can see if virtual machines are being fired up. You can see what's happening with your users, and you can actually look at the overall platform as well. One more example that is, I guess, very specific to the audit logs is if you look at the cloud environment, if you look at AWS Azure, now our organization is Pozitka.com. So typically we would expect that for our tenant, for our subscription of AWS Azure, you would want only Pozitka members to log in. But in many cases, you'll have partners. Now Pozitka might have service partners and they are accessing our cloud. We might have someone who's running a security scan for us and it's a vendor, and so they are logging in from a different domain. So what I would want to do in this case, for example, to have a control is that I want to have a rule that is detecting logins from different domains. So if someone logs in from xyz.com, abc.com, abc.in, I want to be alerted for that. So most of the existing tools that we spoke about, they will have controls that prevent things from happening, saying that, hey, only Pozitka.com can log in. But in terms of saying alerting, saying that people from other domains are logging in, that is more of a detection capability, and that falls squarely in the SIEM side of things. So that's something that the SIEM can do. Now what will happen is that suppose you have someone who's logging in. Now, at this point, you might say that, hey, I don't want them to have update access to any of my services. I just want them to have view access. They shouldn't be able to modify, create, or update anything. So in that case, you can actually even within the SIEM part of it, you can say for each kind of user. Suppose if someone's logging in from securitymonitoring.com, so they should have only access to a certain set of subscription, certain set of services, certain set of activities, and then the SIEM can keep monitoring what is the actual activity happening, and then it can tell you if there's a deviation from that kind of behavior. So again, you can do some very interesting things with the SIEM side, which are actually not really possible. That level of control is typically not possible with the native cloud solutions. So that's a little bit, I think, about the overall applicability of SIEM for threat hunting, for monitoring, for potential malware, malicious actors. And with that, I think we are coming to the end of our session today. We have a few more minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, we would be happy to take that. If not, I think there's also a part around what if you want to explore a little bit more. Murugan showed you the demo. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can mail to demo_request@positka.com, and we'd be happy to give you access to our demo environment so that you can play around a bit. If you have any other questions at all in general, feel free to reach out to us at susan@positka.com, and we would be happy to talk to you about cloud security or on-prem security or whatever else might be a need or a challenge for you or your organization. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of the hour, and I still don't see any questions at the moment. So anything to add, Murugan, or are we good to wind up?
I think we're good, Sam.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for sharing your time. Have a good rest of the day, and have a good weekend. Thank you. Bye.
Sam, we have a question from
Rahul. Okay.
Rahul. Yes.
Okay.
So
yeah, you want to take that, Dinesh?
Yes, Sam. So Rahul, so what we'll be doing is this session is recorded and this will be available on YouTube. So you'll be getting everyone participants, you'll be getting an email from Positka with the link of the recording session and also the demo environments and other details. So you can find the recording over there and access it. Thanks, Sam. Is there anything else?
No, I think it'll be useful to share the presentation also, Dennis. So I'm sure you can share that with Rahul and the rest. So yeah.
Yes, Sam. Yes, Sam.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.